My name is Jesse Leger, and I'm here to talk about a lack of intentionality, how honeypots show us wandering drones. We all have devices connected to the internet in some way. Various data sources, such as the SANS Internet Storm Center, Shodan, and Census, have given us a glimpse into the attacks that regularly happen on the internet and what the attack surface area of the internet looks like. I've often reviewed my firewall logs at home or at work, and have been staggered by the number of attacks regularly identified. This introduces a variety of questions, including, how do my firewall logs compare with those of another institution or residence? Are any of these attacks targeted, and does that targeting change depending on what type of network is being attacked or who owns that network? To help answer this question, a variety of D-Shield honeypots were deployed in different cloud providers in addition to my own residential internet connection. That residential internet connection trying to act as a control, but also a comparison point between residential and cloud hosting providers. Data was stored in JSON files, which is collected either through IP tables, the web honeypot, or Cowrie, which is the SSH Telnet honeypot service. That data was processed using a custom Python package, which served to help collect, summarize, and give clustering details for the honeypot data. One of the first items outside of just pulling the data out was to help summarize and sort that information. One of the items that I wanted to be able to compare was, at a glance, how many attacks were being seen on certain days and how are these being compared per honeypot. So from one view I can easily see is one command from one source being seen in different honeypots, or is it only being seen in one? Also, this is grouped by date to help better compare it over time, but once again to save storage space when summarizing the information, which is also highlighted when looking at one of the lines, which has 533 instances in one day for one honeypot. If this was to have all of the raw logs, this would be at least 533 lines. Once we look at all the variety of attacks for the honeypot, that's a lot more storage space. So the summarizing really helped to shrink the amount of storage required to analyze the information and store it in the long run. Another challenge that came when taking a look at the data, we did want to understand what are some of the differences or similarities from attacks being seen in the different honeypots. But in some cases, the inputs we get, and so in this case it's a password change attempt, the intent is really the same. The command I would consider is the same, but some of the data is slightly different. In this case, we're seeing the password it's trying to be set to is a little bit different per command. For comparison purposes, this needed to be grouped together so we can actually compare, is this kind of command being seen in different honeypots or not. And so dbscan was used to cluster this data, and on the right hand side you can see how this is nicely in one cluster with about 4,300 instances. Granted, in this case there may have been multiple clusters, but it's much easier than taking line by line on the left hand side and manually filtering that out. dbscan was able to help provide this clustering data for easier comparisons. Now, when looking into the honeypot data itself, there was a large overlap, both in the malware that was delivered to the honeypot, to the commands that were being attempted, including for persistence with SSH. The different URLs were also very similar. Most, for example, were taking a look directly at the root URL path, which is pretty common, but might also scale out from there looking for .env files or other configuration files to gain sensitive information. Also username and passwords that were used overlapped quite a bit. The most common username, which is probably not a surprise, is root. About 50% of the attacks were actually still being seen trying the root username, and a variety of others that were common amongst the other honeypots. Some of the differences were few and far between. Some of the differences, which were a little bit more interesting, were port data. So in this case, for DigitalOcean, for example, 3306, which was MySQL, was seen quite a bit higher than the other honeypots. It didn't actually make it into the top 10 for the others, and there were a few ports that were a little bit different. One I'd also highlight from DigitalOcean was 445, so 445 was used for a variety of different worms on the internet. Sasser, Blaster are two really popular examples. For my residential Honeypot, I didn't see that port at all. That actually tends to be because that residential network also tried to protect consumers by blocking that at their borders. So that port wasn't it's not that it wasn't being attacked, it's that there was no way for that attack traffic to get to the honeypot to gather that information. In addition to some of the different ports and some of the scales being a little bit different, there was also a variety of research scans that all of the honeypots did see. One of the possibilities for future research data is to use PCAP information to actually look at these various ports and to see if there's any other attack traffic that is actually different between these that otherwise isn't collected by the honeypot JSON logs. Overall, when taking a look at the research, what does it really tell us? So it tells us that a lot of the attacks that we're seeing on the internet, if you have something that's publicly facing, you're going to be attacked likely by the same thing your neighbor is going to be attacked by. Doing our due diligence and basic cyber hygiene is going to be one of the best recommendations to protect your environment. Being able to communicate with others in the community and understand what other people are seeing is extremely important to know what you can defend yourself against. Scanning resources tend to also be a really good repository for understanding what your attack surface looks like, and you may not necessarily be targeted by a specific malicious actor or a specific attack. A lot of the attacks people see on a day-to-day basis are broadcast, and they are not going to be different necessarily from place to place. However, one of the items that is great to expand on this research is looking at different hosting providers, different network types. And those could be commercial organizations, higher education institutions, and others. So there's a lot this research could expand into to better compare how attacks may be similar or different for these different institutions. If you do have questions about the research, you do want to take a look at some of the data, don't hesitate to reach out to me at jlegrue@gmail.com. Thank you.